I feel that every time I hear anything about Sony these days, it's only ever about them remastering or remaking a game that is only about 2 to 4 years old, and at this point, everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. Sony has the very unfortunate success of being the biggest culprits of cash grab remasters and remakes. For example, The Last of Us has been on 3 different generations of PlayStations, PS3, 4 and 5. And the thing that gets me the most is that the gaps in the release dates are not that far apart. The PS5 is the latest Sony console, and even though it's still relevant, it hasn't managed to outshine the PS4. There are many die-hard fans who still love their PS4s, and with The Last of Us, they remastered The Last of Us, then The Last of Us Part 2 was a new release on the PS4, which was really good for the PS4. The only issue is that Sony re-released both of them on the PS5. The PS5 is backwards compatible, so there is no use for the remastered games. So they essentially made a remaster of a remaster of a remaster of a new release. And might I add that The Last of Us Part 2 was only a few years old at this point. I'm sorry, but since when is 2 to 4 years enough time to make a remaster when the PS4 versions should work just fine? Because the PS5 is backwards compatible, and don't even get me started on Horizon, probably one of the biggest skid marks on the underwear of Sony, they remastered both games for the PS5 as well. You could call Sony smart or you could call them stupid. Only people in question are the people who are buying these games. The one issue is, there are a lot of people who try to sell their PS4s to get PS5s, only to discover that the PS5 is backwards compatible. But the PS4 doesn't hold that much value these days. I've seen people skeptical about the backwards compatibility, often asking me if it is true or not. The sad part is that many people didn't keep their old PS4 games. They often got rid of it and would buy the digital PS5, stating that they bought most of their games digitally anyway. The funny part is that a lot of the PS4 versions of the remastered games are still widely available. For example, the remastered PS4 version of The Last of Us that came out a year after the PS3 version is still available. Even with The Last of Us Part 2, which came out in 2020, the same year that the PS5 came out, even though both PS4 Last of Us games can work on the PS5, they still chose to remaster them. The Last of Us Part 2 came out the same time as the PS5, so why are they remastering the game? Technically, it is just the PS5 port then. My question is, can graphics really change that much in 2 to 4 years? The case gets even worse when you talk about Horizon. Horizon Zero Dawn came out in 2017, and for a PlayStation exclusive, it really maintained its position as a high quality PlayStation game. And when the PS5 came out, the game was only 3 years old. So your guess is as good as mine. There are many speculations as to why Sony is making so many remasters. Some are saying it's because the PS5 is new. Some are saying it's because Sony is out of ideas. Some are saying it's because Sony is broke and needs money. Some are saying it's because Sony is greedy. Some are saying it's for preservation so that the new generations can play them. One could even say it's because Sony knows people will buy them. I feel that if you're going to remaster a game, it should only be a game that is 8 to 10 years old. If you add in backwards compatibility, then there is no reason to remaster the game, especially if the game is available on the PS Store. Being superficial is expensive and it makes Sony so much money. It's like the same argument with the PS5 versus the PS5 Slim versus the PS5 Pro. People, they are the same console. They all play the same games. A lot of the differences with the PS5 Pro were just promised upgrades that most of the time make next to no difference. But hey, it's your money, you spend it as you wish. There are so many other games that deserve remasters. The list is long, so I won't get into it. But Sony has so many other IPs that they could revisit, that could actually bring them a lot of money. I'm not entirely against remasters, but the games they're remastering have to make sense. You can't call it nostalgia if the game is only 4 years old. PS4 was the real next gen. If you compare the graphics from PS4 to PS5, you will notice that the difference is not groundbreaking. It's not like the leap from PS2 to PS3, because back then PS3 really reinvented the wheel. there is absolutely no trace of PS2 in PS3, or if there is, it was not really noticeable. The thing about PS3 is, PS3 had so many good games back then, when game developers were still making great games. Also, the amount of games that PS3 had was a lot. If you missed out on a video game, then you missed out. The best part is that most of the time you could either find a new copy or you could find a second-hand copy on the game that you missed out on. It's the same case with PS4. PS4 had enough of its own big catalog to not need so many remasters. It had, and still to this day has, a really good lifespan. Then you get the PS5, which has a catalog, just not a very big one. And when you compare how many successful games the PS5 has to the amount of flops, the evidence speaks for itself. Sony doesn't need to make such remasters. They have a really good selection of exclusives that they could choose from. Remastering the games they've been remastering won't make them much money in the grand scheme of things. They are chasing short-term goals that don't translate to long-term profits. You see how much money they spent on Concord. That could have been at least 4 long-term projects. Live service games don't have the best longevity. Yes, there are many good examples of long-standing live service games, but it seems like as of late, most often lifespan of a live service game is about 2 to 4 years, and that is if you are lucky. If the game is actually good. PS5 is a hit or a miss with me. It's a really good console, I like it. It's a really nice piece of tech, but that's where all the good things end for me. As for the consoles that came before, they were just managed a lot better. They had better games. They fulfilled their intended purpose of being fun consoles to play on, giving the user hundreds to thousands of hours, years to decades of fun and entertainment that the said user enjoys today. I still have my original PS3 games that I have had and played for many years, but then you get the PS5 that is only 4 years into its life cycle, and it is already relying on the previous generation to bail it out from its low point. When the console literally came out yesterday, and now we are down to the 3rd version of the PS5, which has done very little to save the PS5 because Sony keeps releasing new consoles that barely have any new games to play. You could blame Sony, or you could blame it on the fact that, as they say, gaming is dying. 9th gen has only just arrived, and yet people are already in talks of the next generation. And my question is, what are you going to play on the next gen? And with that, this is the Chilling Man signing off. I thank everyone for watching. Peace out.